Eric Flanagan, welcome to the tasting room.
Excited to be here, John.
I know, fresh off a plane from, I never know where you are. I know you came from Chicago this time.
I did, yeah. 2 dinners in Chicago and then here for 3 nights and then Florida for 10 nights.
There you go. If the name sounds familiar, it should. He is the founder, CEO, CMO, what other C's? What other
I'm not the
C-suite?
CFO. I have one of those.
You have a CFO, okay.
Yeah, but I think
Flanagan
I'd be the
Wines.
rest of them.
Yeah, out in Healdsburg, California, which is beautiful if you haven't been. Go, don't tell Eric I told you to call him, but go see the winery and do all the things.
I'm sure John's going to post my cell phone number at the end of the call.
Address, cell phone number,
right.
all of the things. How you been, man?
I've been good, traveling a lot. We did some family fun travel over Christmas. Went down to New Zealand.
That. Yeah.
That was super cool. I've been down there a lot, and I have some friends down there, so got some surfing and sampled the wines of New Zealand,
How do you sample wines? How does that work when someone that has been so intricately involved in that world for so long, can you disassociate yourself from I would do this differently or this isn't?
You judge everything. You don't walk through the airport, you're judging everybody you see in the airport,
True.
right? If you like their outfit, whether they're staying in shape or not, right?
Yeah.
We walk around judging the whole world, and we certainly evaluate wines, but it's not a formal thing. We went and did a fun tasting up north in New Zealand, way north up by the Bay of Islands. There's a little winery up there. I'm sure it's hemorrhaging money. But
Sure.
that's mostly what I see when I go to visit other wineries. I look around and I estimate how much money they lose a year because it's
such a dark way to look at it.
It's a
though.
very tough business,
Yeah.
and having gone through 20 years of losing money myself before we finally turned the corner, it's impossible for me not to kind of look at it like a business when I go see them. But we're always super friendly to the proprietors or whoever hosts us.
They need it.
And we always buy a bunch of wine off of them. I mean, it was tough because we had to then drink it all before we left New Zealand.
True.
You can only bring 6 bottles back. So,
is that what they limit?
You can bring, I think, 6 bottles per adult person could come back, but you have to have a case to carry it in. And I had brought 6 bottles down. We were doing Christmas with a good friend of mine, so I brought some wine for Christmas, and then figured I'd get some New Zealand wine to put back in the slots, bring 6 bottles home. So we did that, and then we visited another winery in Waiheke Island, 2 other wineries actually in Waiheke, and so we tried. And then we go to the wine shop and pick up a bunch of wine and try it. But we're not sitting down doing formal tastings, okay, what are you getting on the nose?
Right.
We don't do any of that. It's the wife and 3 kids. Ruby is legal in New Zealand, which she was extremely excited about.
Watch out, New Zealand.
Right? So she's
Ruby
going
on the
into
loose.
a bar going, I'd like to get a beer. And this seems very exciting, I guess, if you're 19, right? So the 5 of us were able to all, enjoy the wines together. We just drink wine while we're eating dinner or, watching Lord of the Rings. Or in New Zealand, you have to rewatch Lord of the Rings.
Oh, that's true.
Because it's,
Yeah. Did you see any of the spots from the movie?
No.
No.
Apparently, we're only about an hour from Hobbit Town, which I guess is
Hobbit
just
World or
south
whatever.
of Auckland. But we didn't make it down there. We're not really tourists in the traditional sense.
Fair.
We don't go see a lot of sites. We, in the path of doing what we do, occasionally stumble across something touristic.
Yeah.
We 4 years ago we were in Sydney for Christmas, and on New Year's we went to the Sydney Opera House and saw a great show, and then they do the fireworks.
Yeah. How is it inside? Because you obviously see outside.
Yeah, it's spectacular.
Yeah.
The acoustics are amazing. It was a great place to see a show. It was my wife Kit. It was her idea to do that, and it was awesome. The only problem is that they close off all of downtown Sydney for the fireworks, so everyone's dressed up for the opera New Year's Eve. And we went to dinner before, so they're all in heels and stuff, and you had to walk. It had to be at least 2 miles and maybe more to get out of the zone where everything's shut down to car traffic to get a freaking Uber back to the Airbnb we had rented. So
that's brutal.
That was a workout.
If I ever get on a plane for that flight, which the older I get, the more I'm not sure if that's ever going to happen. That's such a long flight. But if I ever get down there, you have to stay for an extended amount of time to make the trip worth it.
You should go for at least a couple weeks.
Yeah, but I want to see an Aussie rules football match or a rugby match or something. I think that would be a lot of fun.
Go see the All Blacks.
Yeah,
That's an amazing experience.
Exactly.
Yeah. they're the real deal. I mean,
Yeah.
for a country of 4 million people to consistently have the top rugby squad in the world, it's pretty
saying
impressive.
something. Yeah.
And it's also fun to go down to the waterway. I don't know if you're into sailing, but again, small nation, but everyone in New Zealand has a boat.
I'm trying
There's
to think.
4 million people, and they all have a boat, and they won the America's Cup.
That's what it was.
Multiple times. Yeah.
Because I watched that documentary I think it was on Netflix or something like that.
I think it was there for 3. I think they defended it 3 times, and it really, they actually built up the entire downtown area around the little harbor where the America's Cup boats were docked, and they still have one of the boats down there that you can see.
That's cool.
It's cool. Auckland is a very nice city. It's small, maybe 1.5 million people in Auckland. You know how that's like Tulsa is 1 million people.
Metro,
counting
or what are you talking about?
Broken Arrow, right?
Yeah.
Well, Auckland, counting everything within 60 miles of it, is 2 million people, which, I'd say half the people in New Zealand do live within an hour of Auckland.
Okay.
So once you get outside of Auckland, there are almost no people.
Interesting.
And if you go to the South Island, I think the population of the South Island, which is about the same size as the North Island, and collectively they're about the size of California. It's big, right?
Yeah.
I think there are less than 1 million people in the South Island. So it's truly empty. Yeah, and probably 250 of those are in Christchurch.
Yeah.
So it's just unbelievable amounts of open land there.
Were they still hardline on COVID stuff?
No.
Okay.
No, I think.
I know they were for a while as far as letting people in.
They went. Yeah. They had a national psychosis around it.
Yeah.
Where they were like, "We're an island. We can protect ourselves. None of us could ever get COVID." Turned out not to be true. And I think, by the way, anecdotally, I think COVID is ripping its way through Australia and New Zealand.
China as well.
They didn't let it happen, and now it's happening.
Yeah.
It's irrepressible.
Right.
There's no, and I like to rant a little bit about that, but
we're going to get into Larry's dead uncle here in a little bit.
But the vaccine, the definition for me of a vaccine, and we could look up the Webster's.
Keep you from getting sick.
It's something that prevents you from getting the disease.
Sure.
So if you get a smallpox vaccine, you don't get smallpox.
Right. It's not that you're going to get it and not get as sick from it. You're not going to get it.
You're not going to get it at all.
Right.
And even with tetanus, you need a booster. But if you have the tetanus shots and you get the booster, you don't get tetanus.
Right.
That's a vaccine.
Right.
And you can have a booster for a vaccine, but to be a vaccine, it actually has to prevent the disease that it's targeted at. So there's things called flu shots. They don't call the flu shot a vaccine because it doesn't prevent you from getting the flu.
Right.
The whole idea where they called the COVID shot a vaccine, that's semantically incorrect. It's not a vaccine. It's a flu shot.
This is going to set a precedent for me in history. It's going to be the first one I ever do that I put on YouTube and gets flagged for COVID misinformation or COVID talk or COVID whatever they do now.
Well, I think it's not misinformation.
I
believe it's true.
No, I'm with you. I'm with you.
I think calling it a vaccine is misinformation.
Yeah.
So
that's true.
It should be called the COVID flu shot or something like that because that's what it is.
Let's just go straight in. Let's keep going down this road. So in 2020. You can correct me if I'm wrong here, but there was frustration from a business owner's standpoint, feeling like you couldn't say the things you needed to say or critique what you needed to critique.
We couldn't do what we needed to do.
Right. Well, that too.
Yeah, they shut down our whole business.
And thus spawned Larry's dead uncle.
Yeah. And, there's a misperception, I think, in the broad population. Everyone's like, oh, everyone drank a lot of wine during COVID. You guys killed it. I'm like, no. The people that sold wine in grocery stores killed it. So Gallo and Kendall Jackson and Constellation, the large wine brands that own the grocery store shelves, like in some cases literally, they did very, very well. People hoarded cheap wine like toilet paper, right? It's a necessity.
Right.
If you have booze and toilet paper, you're good, right? That's pretty much the two most important things.
Sure.
We found out the two most important things in the world are toilet paper and alcohol, right? But it was cheap grocery store alcohol that got ripped off the shelves. We depend, by contrast, on restaurants and country clubs and events I do around the country and visitors to the winery. That's how we sell wine. We don't sell any wine in grocery stores. So our sales went to zero. So that was a huge challenge. And there was really no consideration around that. And so there was a lot of frustration. We'd spent 20 years. We finally got to a tiny profit in 2019. I felt a lot of optimism going into 2020.
Boom.
And as Riley, my oldest daughter, she said she'd never seen me. I was actually despondent for 2 to 2.5 days, where I just literally said, now what do I...
In March when you had to shut down.
When we locked down, I'm like, how am I going to do this? Now what do I do, right? All the channels through which I sell wine are shut, right? We had one left. We have Wine Club.
Yeah.
But you can only push so much wine
through
the Wine Club, right? Like they
right.
buy what they buy. And, it was Riley, to her eternal credit, who said, Daddy, you just got to get digital. You've got to find a way to connect with people online. I know it's not the same as in person. It's not as good as in person, but it's all you have. So Riley and I scheduled 250 Zoom calls over the course of the year from March of 2020 to March of 2021. And we created a schedule of events. I reached out to all my club members, said, do you have a company event you can do, client entertainment? Is there a family holiday coming up or a birthday that you want to celebrate with people all around the country? I'll send them wine, and we can do a tasting of the wines with your group, whether it's a client group or a corporate colleague group. It was a really smart idea. Whatever it was. And so we created a calendar. And I would do 2 calls a week for our club members and then fill in the rest of the week with private calls for companies or families or whatever. And we managed to sell 2,000 cases of wine direct to consumer through those calls. And that's what got us through
Kept the lights on.
2020.
Yeah.
That's why we're still here. That was Riley's idea, but it was immense amount of work. That's the thing people wouldn't understand. I probably spent 60 hours a week generating the demand for the calls, like reaching out to people to get them to agree to do one, and then scheduling it. And then we had the logistics of getting the wine shipped, and then we have to create the order form for that event. Riley did that part. And then you have to host it. And I was hosting 6 or 7 calls a week. So, that on itself was probably 10 or 12 hours actually on Zoom doing the tastings. So it was pretty crazy time.
I didn't bring you wine to drink because I figured you had enough of it and we'll have enough of it, but hand me your glass. I know you're a lager Pilsner guy.
I do. I like beer.
So one of these we can try. This is from the
You're
Big
on
Friendly.
Your own with the whiskey. But...
Yeah, I didn't know, so I brought it. This is from the Big Friendly down in Oklahoma City, which just won at the Great American Beer Festival for the #1 brewery in the country for their mid-size brewery.
Fantastic.
They do a really good job. But as I pour this,
I really like craft beer.
Yeah.
And to me, there's a comparison. Thank you.
Sure thing.
Between craft beer and artisanally made wines. I think they have the same philosophy. So, you've got giant companies. Cheers, Johnny. Good to see you.
You too.
There are... That's super pleasant.
Yeah, just nice.
Very nice.
Yeah.
And is that a rice-based beer?
It is. It is a Carolina Gold Rice Lager.
Nice. Very pleasant.
Yeah.
And, when you have the rice, you get a little bit different...
It's like a mouthfeel.
A little bit different palate on the beer. But anyway, you have giant companies like, Heineken and InBev, Anheuser-Busch. And, their beer is fine. It's fine. They make beer consistently. And that's to me, if you go to, McDonald's or Burger King or Wendy's, you know what you're getting. And sometimes that's what you want.
Sometimes it's all you need.
Sometimes that's what you want.
Right.
And they do okay for what they're supposed to be doing. But there's a real big difference between that and going to Lowood or Proximo, where we went last night, where they're making everything to order and they're super focused on sourcing great ingredients. The chef is passionate about the menu. That, same experience in food translates to beer and wine. And when you get artisanal producers, the level of focus and attention, the quality of the ingredients they're using to make the product.
And just the creativity, too.
It's much higher. So the level of detail and focus, in our process, we're sourcing grapes from the very best vineyard sites and paying a big multiple, 2 or 3 or 4 or 10 times what a large company would pay for their cheaper offerings. There's people buying fruit for $500 a ton, and at Platt we were paying $15,000 a ton for the Pinot and $10,000 a ton for the Chardonnay. So the cost of our
huge price difference.
Material, and that would translate to $20 a bottle difference in price, in cost. So wild difference. And then in terms of the process, the winemaking process, they have fermentation tanks, one tank that does more than an entire year of production for us.
Right.
Way more.
Right.
Way more. Maybe 5 years of production for us.
Because what's your average production for a year?
We're doing about 4,000 cases of Flanagan. And so our average cuvee is 200 or 300 cases. I make about 18 different wines. So very small. So you're talking about 8 or 10 or 12
Right.
barrels of each wine. You know the names of each of the barrels.
Sure,
You know the
sure.
characteristics of each barrel. You're intentional. You think about which barrels to use for each different wine you're making and do a mix of barrels. Out of those 10 or 12 barrels, you might use 3 or 4 different types of barrels sourced from different forests, toasted at different levels, made by different coopers. So you're really developing a level of focus and specificity that's incredible.
Yeah.
And that barrel program is only a small part of the total process. But we spend more time on that than a large producer would spend thinking about the wine
Yeah.
in total.
I did like your barrel room.
It's a very, very different process. And that's why I appreciate craft beer, because they're bringing that same philosophy, that same mindset to what they're doing.
So like your cuvée that you talked about, do you price your bottles based on supply and demand? So like if the supply is less, would that bottle be more than your Chardonnay or something?
You know, I know that happens sometimes when you get like a cult wine where Screaming Eagle doesn't cost $1,500 a bottle to make.
Right, right.
They just have created this impression of scarcity, whether it's true or not.
Right.
I know there are wines out there that have cultivated an impression of scarcity that are not in fact scarce.
Sure.
They're sticking 3/4 of what they make in a warehouse and telling you can't have it. It's hard to figure out how that works out in the end, but warehouse fire maybe, and you get the insurance money on the rest, and you assume that the value was what you sold 1/4 of it for.
True.
I don't know. But we're really driven by 2 things in the pricing. Number one is the costs. So I have to charge more for a plat wine than I do for a wine from another vineyard because the fruit costs more.
Right.
So if the fruit cost is $10 a bottle higher,
So that really is the main driving force.
that's a big driver, is the cost.
Yeah.
And then different types of wine have different costs associated with them. Like a Cabernet is going to be in a lot of new barrels, which are expensive, and it's going to be in barrel for 2 years, which is expensive.
Okay.
Takes up space in the winery, needs a lot more attention in the winemaking, so it's more labor cost going into it, as opposed to like a Sauvignon Blanc that Riley makes, where it's in steel tank for 4 months, and then you bottle it.
Can wine do second fill on a barrel, or is all wine?
No, you can use barrels again. You have to clean them really well, which some people don't, but we do. In fact, with some of Riley's wines, we'll use neutral barrels, which are barrels that have been used 5 or 6 times.
Okay.
So then you get some of the characteristics of a barrel fermentation, meaning more oxygen contact, which softens the wine. It basically ages it a little bit in the barrel, more than it would in a stainless tank, which is sealed, and also gets it a little bit more lees contact. So, the lees are the dead yeast cells and the little bits of grape must that precipitate out of the wine and sit in the bottom of the barrel. And when the wine's in contact with that, it picks up a little more richness and a little more flavor. So when you do it in a barrel, the wine has more contact with the lees than it would in a big stainless tank. So those are the 2 things that you get from using a neutral barrel that make the wine a little richer and a little more textural without giving it any oak flavor at all.
Yeah.
So if you have a Chardonnay that you want a little bit of an oak nuance in, we don't go for a heavy oak presence in the wines, but you do want a little bit of traditionally Burgundy, high-end Burgundy is made with some percentage of new oak and a little bit of an oak influence. It adds another element to the wine.
So when you reuse a barrel, whether it's second fill or neutral, like you're talking about, do you keep the same varietal in the barrel for that entire lifespan? Or
You can take white barrels and use them for red wine.
But the other way,
just like with your glass.
Yeah.
If you had white wine in your glass, you can probably keep using the same glass and put red wine in it. But if you had a red wine in there and you pour a Sauvignon Blanc or a Cabernet,
rosé, right?
It turns it into rosé.
Yeah.
So you can't really do that.
Sure. So I mentioned Larry's dead uncle earlier, and then we didn't really get to it. So you were despondent for a couple days when everything shut down.
Yeah. Then we started doing all the Zoom calls.
Yeah. Was Larry's dead uncle, which I'm going to have you explain for people that are watching and don't know what that is. You can find it on YouTube. It's hilarious. Was that an outlet for you that, looking back on it, was actually helpful?
Oh, it was incredibly helpful, and I continue. It inspired a binge, like they would call it if it was a crime spree. It was like a crime spree of creativity, where.
So what is it for people that are listening or watching and don't know?
So the quick version of the story, which could take a week to tell, but the quick version of the story is my youngest daughter, Ruby, who was 16 at the time, seized the engine on my 2009 4Runner, which all 3 of the kids learned to drive on and saved their lives probably multiple times. She finally killed it. The car's nickname was Eddie because it had Eddie Would Go stickers from Eddie Aikau, the great Hawaiian surfer. So she killed Eddie. She didn't know what the little light in the corner meant when it came on. And by the way, if you don't have your seatbelt on, the car acts like the world's ending. But if your engine is going to seize because there's no oil, it just has a little quiet light in the corner. Yeah. So Ruby at 16 didn't know what it meant, seized the engine on the car. It's COVID. This is like April or May of 2020. Used cars are unobtainable. There are no new cars being made. Everything is shut down. I have no money, right? I'm terrified about the wine business going bankrupt and I have to go buy a car. So I'm bitching to my surf buddy, Larry. I'm like, geez, I got a car. I have no idea where to get a car. He's like, oh, my uncle just died. He was 87. He's got this 2011 Jetta with 32,000 miles on it. You should buy that. I'm like, well, what do you want for it? He's like, I was going to ask $8,000, but you're a friend, $7,500.
I'll give you something, right.
Turned out it needed a $3,000 transmission repair and a new set of tires. So
it was a $15,000.
I was in it for about 11 or 12 grand by the time it was all done. But that's how life goes, right? But anyway, we bring the car home, and then Riley and Will come back from college because it's shut. He says, might as well come home. And Riley comes in and says, what's with the little white Jetta in the driveway? It's kind of like a little hot girl car, but like, where's that from? I'm like, that's Ruby's new used car. She's like, where'd you get that? I'm like, from Larry's dead uncle. She's like, wait, Larry's dead uncle? I'm like, you know Larry, his dead uncle. I'm like, wait, that's the best band name I ever came up with, Larry's dead uncle. So I recruited 4 of the boys that Riley went to school with at Cal Poly to be a pretend band, and then wrote and recorded a bunch of original songs.
You're probably up to what, 12?
12, yeah, 9 for the show I did, and then I've written and recorded 3 songs since. And I honestly feel like the 3 I've done since the show are 3 of the strongest songs that we've done. I hate to think we're getting better at it, but maybe.
Well, it's good because you're about to go on a world tour, which we'll talk about in a little bit.
It's going to have to start in Finland, I think, right? Yeah. But so that was really the genesis of the idea. And then the premise is, first of all, the boys don't really have a lot of musical talent. Now, to be fair, in the show, my wife says, they can't even play instruments. I'm like, that's not the point. You think like One Direction? You think the Beatles knew how to, like, they're boy bands. Right. They don't have to be good. They teach them the music part. It's all about the vibe.
It's all about the vibe.
It's about the vibe and the look, And these kids are perfect.
They were really
Maxie,
good.
Davey, Aiden, and Zach. Their names are even perfect. Those are their real freaking names. And they're just amazing. They're great kids. And I loved hanging out with them. So you were there. We filmed some of the stuff and, had pretend rehearsals. But the premise of the show is we have the band, we have the music. The guys are jonesing to play, but all the venues are closed. So the only way we can get the word out about the music is to get somebody to pay $3 million to make a movie about our band, Larry's Dead Uncle. So the whole show is about me going around pitching my friends, some of whom pretend to be Hollywood producers, and I think do a very credible job of pretending.
Kyle and Marco.
Yeah, they're fantastic. And they both have brushes. Kyle was the stunt double, body double, surfing double, skateboard double, driving double for Heath Ledger.
Oh, wow.
And Marco produced an award-winning short film with a friend of his who's an actor. So they both had brushes with Hollywood. And Marco was so funny. He said, I'll do this for you, Eric, but I want you to know I'm a little stiff in front of the camera. I've been in front of the camera before. I'm not that good. And I said to him, Marco, did they ask you to memorize lines? He's like, yeah, they did. And I'm like, were some of those lines things you wouldn't naturally say as yourself? He's like, yeah. I'm like, here's what we can figure out about this, Marco. You suck at acting, but you're a great character.
Right.
And he's a brilliant character.
Yeah.
So I said, here's the deal. You're just going to be you. I'm going to talk to you. You're going to talk to me. My wife's going to stand over there with an iPhone held sideways, and we're going to see where it goes. And he's brilliant. Yeah. And some of the stuff that he comes up with, I had no clue he was going to anticipate. I had no idea that he was going to say some of the things that he went off on. And, somebody told me years ago, the first rule of stand-up comedy is never negate what the other person said. So whatever he says, you just go with it.
Just go with it.
Just go with it, And we had some extremely funny moments. But that's how it all happened. And we had 9 episodes of me going around trying to get somebody to give me $3 million and getting smashed.
Sure.
And I think some of the funniest scenes are with my wife, who not only doesn't commiserate with me when I'm feeling down about it, she tells me I'm idiotic for even thinking about doing this because no one will ever do it.
Right. You can find all those episodes on YouTube. Just search for Larry's Dead Uncle. You can also find Eric's music, both from Larry's Dead Uncle and are you releasing the ones that you've done since under Larry's Dead Uncle or just under Eric Flanagan?
You know what? The way that the world is set up, that Spotify and Apple Music, they're all set up the same way, is you release something as an album. Mm-hmm. So I have 9 songs for Larry's Dead Uncle. You can't add to that.
So that's the album, right? Gotcha.
So everything you release when you do a one-off song after that, it gets released as a single.
Gotcha.
So I've released the 9 songs from Larry's Dead Uncle, and then the 2 singles that we've done since then. Cancel Jesus, parentheses, do I have to, question mark. Important to have the second half of the title or it's confusing. And I Caught It From You, which is hilarious. Those are both on there as singles. And then I have a 3rd song that we'll be putting up soon that I'm pretty excited about, too.
That's awesome. And the reason we were joking about a world tour is because of the analytics you can pull off of Spotify.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what percentage, maybe you know off the top of your head, but a lot of your listenership is in Finland.
Yeah, and it's weird
places.
how it works. And it's super, it's challenging. You really can't figure it out. But I think I've had 7,000 streams, and 1,000 of them are from Finland. So particularly the Cancel Jesus, Do I Have to song, it got playlisted on some playlist that's popular in Finland called Top 80 and had 932 streams in a day. That's not a lot of streams in the world of like Beyonce or Ariana
like Taylor
Grande.
Swift wouldn't think twice about that. But,
that's a minute for her.
Right.
But that's a big day for me,
sure,
932 streams, and it was all off that playlist and all in Finland.
And we should say you do have musical background in your life.
I do, yeah. I was in band in high school. I mean, I played trumpet in middle school and high school, which I hate the trumpet. But then I had a band in high school that I kind of created. It was funny. We went to church, in Presbyterian church, and I got one of the advisors to the youth group, who was an amazing bass player, to agree to as a church rock band, which on some level, you know,
I can't see you in a church rock band.
You can't hardly see me in church.
That too.
So
yeah, that too.
It was very interesting. One of our most fun experiences we had, we played a gig for the Jewish Temple youth group. They were doing like a big party, dance party, and we played. And we actually had a really good band because the guy who organized it, Bob Gilligan, was an amazing musician. And there was this kid, Mark Perry, who could play like all 3 parts of the Freebird Ride by himself.
Wow.
He was super talented. And a friend of mine, Dave Pace, who I'm still in touch with, who played bass. Dave Pace plays bass. And I sang, and then there was a girl, Gay Ellsworth, who had a great voice, much better than mine. And so that was basically our band. And we had a keyboard kid, Mike Palshigov, and a really good drummer, who's another friend of mine who I'm still in touch with, John Parsons. So that was a great experience for me. And I was like small in high school and not really popular.
Yeah.
So fronting the band was good for me socially. I used to get quite nervous. You know what my biggest fear was? Is I was really afraid I'd forget the words to Stairway to Heaven.
The words.
Stairway to Heaven.
Just that song.
Because it's a non sequitur. The verses don't make any sense. One doesn't lead to another. Think about that song. It's a collection of random things. There's not a story to it.
Right.
It's all over the map. And here's the thing.
I hadn't thought about that,
There's
but that's
nobody who knows all the words to Stairway to Heaven, but everyone knows if you get them wrong.
That's a good point.
There's a lot of songs like that, but that one used to give me nightmares. It's a lot of words to it.
Yeah.
But then I went off to college. I didn't really do anything with music in college, but when I started at Citicorp Investment Bank, my first boss, Chris Caruso, is a songwriter and musician, and he and I started playing gigs in New Jersey and Greenwich Village. We'd get hired playing covers, and then we'd work in stuff he wrote or I wrote. I started writing. I wrote my first set of songs when I was probably 22 or 23 and working at Citicorp Investment Bank. And we'd work in the stuff that we wrote and inevitably get fired when we got to about 50% originals. People say they love original music. What they want to do is get drunk and sing along with songs they know.
Yeah.
They don't want to hear original music. They really don't.
Yeah.
But we would get fired. And, in the beginning, Chris would make me play the songs that I wrote. And I I'm not a good guitar player now, but I was truly pitiful back then. And I'd be looking at my fingers and like,
Yeah.
you know, like just clanking, like totally messing up the chords. And the guitar would be out of tune. People would heckle me, "Tune the guitar, you idiot." You know, like they would heckle me in New Jersey. People will heckle you if you
for
suck.
anything.
Yeah. It's a sport there.
Yeah,
That's like an activity.
Jersey and Philly.
Hey, let's go out and heckle somebody, you know? And so the great thing about that is I was never nervous singing in front of people again because it was so much easier than playing guitar in front of people.
Honestly, though.
If you want to get over a fear, just do something worse.
Right.
That's it.
Makes it seem a lot less daunting.
Yeah.
Right?
Honestly.
Yeah.
You know?
So you mentioned it. You were in the financial world out of college, hedge funds and all that stuff. So when and how did wine creep into your life if you're doing hedge fund stuff?
So I was a trader. So it starts when I was, a young trader at Citicorp, and the brokers, you're doing a lot of business with brokers, are making a lot of money. They want you to go out for dinner. So you're going out for nice dinners, you're having good wines, and then you meet other people in the business who are really into wine, and they start educating you on wine, like bringing you to, there's a restaurant in the city called Veritas that had an amazing wine list.
Oh, that's the one I was going to go to, but the trip got canceled, wasn't it? Veritas? When I was going to go up to New Jersey or New York, New Jersey, and you made a call, or that was to the Polo Bar.
That was Polo Bar, yeah,
Never mind.
Which is a fun vibe also. But Veritas, I don't even know if it's still around, but in the 80s, it was the place to go to get great wine at a fair markup. And, we spent a lot of time there and drank a lot of really good wine. So I started to learn about it. And then, I traveled a lot and I would visit wineries and vineyards around the world. I visited wineries in Australia, New Zealand, Greece, Italy, Portugal, Spain, France, everywhere. And I got really interested in growing grapes because I love the idea that the same grape variety grown in different soils or different climate, or even in the hands of a different winemaker, could produce such a different product, such a different end result, such a unique wine. And I love that. I love the artistic aspect of that. So in 1999, I bought, which is right after I started my own hedge fund, which I started in October of 1998, I bought a piece of ground in Sonoma County.
And you were how old then?
36.
36?
I just turned 36 in October of 99. So I was 35 when I started the fund. I started the fund 2 days after my 35th birthday. And then Riley was born August 9th of 1999. And we bought the vineyard just after that. And it was not planted. It was just bare ground. So we spent a couple of years getting the permits and lining up the plant materials. And then we planted the vines in like July of 2021. So Riley would have been almost 2 when we planted the first vine, and she helped me plant that first vine, which was amazing. Yeah. So glad somebody took pictures that day.
Yeah. So that makes sense then that you do the Russian River like investment side of things, because it seems like when you take your background as like researching things from a hedge fund perspective and what to invest in and whatnot, and your knowledge of wine, to not only have your own winery and grapes and grow, but to like point out and like do research on this plot of land we should buy because of X, Y, and Z.
I think what you're segueing into is me telling you I have 2 businesses.
Yes, yeah.
One is the winery, which I have no partners in because it's not a financially rational business. You shouldn't invest in it. So I didn't ask anybody to invest in it, because if I'm going to lose all the money, I should just lose my own money.
Right.
But
you can sleep better at night that way.
Yeah, and I think the other part of that is that I don't want anyone else telling me how I should be doing things or what I should be doing, which is, by the way, why I created my own hedge fund. It's possible I would have made more money working for another larger hedge fund that could have allocated me more capital, and I could have, made more money. But I like to be able to do things the way I want to do them. And to me, I think that's more important than making a lot of money. Based on the results of my life, it would be evident that that's true.
Right.
Because I have regularly chosen the path of doing things how I want and being in charge of myself rather than making a lot of money.
But there's something to be said for that. There's a life lesson in that for a lot of people,
But wouldn't make everybody happy, but it makes me happy. Yeah. I think that's an important thing, is to realize what it is that you like and what makes you happy, and do that. And if being a billionaire would make you happy, then be a billionaire. And if doing things the way you like to do them and being really happy with the result and feeling confident and good about what you do and how you do it, if that's important to you more than money, then do that.
Yeah.
So when I ran my hedge fund, I delivered great results. My investors to this day are friends of mine and grateful for the job I did for them. I always put them first. I put delivering results to my investors ahead of making money for myself. And as a consequence, all of those guys also invested in my vineyard project. So I had the winery. The winery was losing money, and I had no other source of income after I closed the fund at the end of 2013. So I said, you know, I always need 2 jobs. That's my wife's theory, is that I just want 2 jobs. But I'm like, I got to do something to make money. What skills do I have, and what context do I have? What could I do? I said, well, owning a winery isn't a great idea, but vineyards can be quite profitable. Those are really just real estate. So just like you can find a commercial real estate building and say, oh, it's only 60% occupied, the owners are doing a crappy job marketing it, it's not well maintained, it doesn't have good curb appeal, I'm going to go in and spend a little bit of money to make it look better. I'm going to market it better, get it fixed up better, do a better job managing the tenants, get it fully rented and flip it and make a bunch of money. People do that. They do it with strip malls. They do it with apartment buildings. You can do it with vineyards too. You can find a vineyard that's good grape varieties and good plant materials in the right location for those grape varieties. You know, different grapes need different soils and different climates, but you find something that's workable, that's not well run. Either it's not farmed well and it looks bad, or they don't know how to market the fruit. They don't know how to sell the fruit, so they're selling it for the cheapest price to the worst winery. Or there's a big house associated with it that you figure out you could separate from the vineyard, and then the house and the vineyard will both have more value when they're not commingled, because the buyer of the house doesn't want a 30-acre vineyard to manage, and the commercial buyer for the 30-acre vineyard doesn't want a $3 million house.
Right.
That it makes it not pencil. So
that was on Platt, right?
Yeah, and that also happened at the thing that gave me the idea for it is when we moved out there, I bought a house, and it was a 59-acre ranch with a 30-acre vineyard and a house. And I separated the vineyard from the house, improved the vineyard, sold the fruit from the vineyard to better wineries at higher prices, and ended up selling the vineyard to a very well-known winery for a lot of money. And I was like, oh, I could do that again. Why not? But I don't have enough money to do it on a larger scale. But I know a lot of people in the financial business who trust me, because I dealt with them for 29 years in the financial business, who think I'm smart, correctly or incorrectly. They have that belief. And they haven't talked to my wife enough, so they still think I'm smart. Right. And then thirdly, many of them had a lot of financial assets, stocks and bonds, but didn't have a lot of real assets. I think a lot of them had concerns about inflation and liked the idea of owning some real assets that are a good hedge on inflation, but didn't know how to invest in real assets, didn't know which real asset to buy. They don't know which vineyard to buy. They'll buy the wrong one.
Right.
But I know which one to buy. And so they trusted me, and so I was able to raise $17 million of equity and another $10 million of financing and buy $27 million worth of vineyards, which turned into a nice little business.
Absolutely.
And as you mentioned, we had the sale, our first sale of one of the properties we purchased, and that went very, very well. Yeah. So the investors were happy with that.
So unlike what you did for Flanagan, where you bought land that didn't have vines or grapes growing on it yet,
right?
Now you look for, from an investment side, you're not necessarily looking for that.
It's more things that are existing vineyards that we can fix.
Okay.
Because the development is a longer timeline.
Sure.
Generally.
Sure.
Generally.
Yeah, that makes sense. So. I have a question about wine in general. So, and I don't know, so forgive me for my lack of knowledge here, but what you've mentioned here is that you source fruit from a bunch of top-notch growing sites, right?
Yeah.
And then you make wine from that.
Yep.
Is that commonplace for wineries to do, or do some wineries / how many, I don't know, actually just grow from their own land?
And I don't know the exact percentage. I think, not all wineries, but I would say the preponderance of wineries, if they grow their own grapes, also source fruit from other vineyard sites. And the thing is this, I think, like our goal, we want to make great wines from the best vineyard sites in Sonoma County. And we own a few of those. Yep. I mean, we own some really good vineyard sites, but we don't own all the great sites. So, Ritchie Vineyard, which we source from, is a terrific source for Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. The Bacigalupi Vineyard, very famous vineyard we get Chardonnay from, it's a privilege to make wines from those sites.
Sure.
They're unique and distinctive, and the fruit is tremendous. So we make great wines from those.
Yeah.
I don't own them. They're not selling, and if they did, I might not be able to afford it.
For sure.
But I think those would both sell. I mean, Richie is, I think, about 60 acres, which is a pretty good-sized vineyard, and the Bacigalupi family has about 120 acres. So those are big vineyards, and they're very well known. So they'll sell for a premium.
So help me understand the price point of that. Are we talking like 10 figures? Are we talking in the B's, or are we talking?
No, you're
in the
talking about
millions?
like a typical Sonoma County vineyard would be anywhere between $100,000 and $150,000 an acre.
Okay.
You know, like a good Pinot Noir vineyard or Cabernet vineyard might sell for $150. Something more, run of the mill might be $100. Depends on a number of factors, like is it in the Russian River part of the appellation or not? How productive is the site? What are the crop yields, in other words, from the site? That's a big driver of value. But the biggest driver is, the reputation of the vineyard.
So I was way off with a B. There's not going to be a vineyard that's...
But you might have, the Ritchie vineyard might sell for $250,000 an acre or something like that because it's very, very well known. So, and, if the Bacigalupi vineyard at 120 acres, if that's sold for even $150,000 an acre, which would probably go for more than that, you're talking about $18 million ballpark. So that with that brand that they've established, they might get 20 or 25 or even, I don't know, 30 million, but not $1 billion.
Right.
But just for fun, someone told me that they were recently offered a quarter of an acre.
Okay.
No, I'm sorry. It was a hectare. It was 1 acre. Okay. It was 1 acre, so it was like a fraction of a hectare, like 40% of a hectare. 1 acre, or just shy of 1 acre, of Grand Cru Burgundy vineyard ground. $40 million.
For an acre?
Was the number for 1 acre. So
okay, so selling that, I wouldn't have been far off for saying $1 billion.
No, you'd be getting.
If you're going to sell the whole
you'd
thing.
be getting there.
Yeah.
So I think one thing that tells you is that there's a lot of potential upside for the top Sonoma vineyard sites.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you'll see more and more.
And this was in Sonoma that you're talking about?
Well, that's a Grand Cru Burgundy vineyard site in France.
Oh, in France, in Burgundy, France.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So Sonoma County is not yet seen as the equivalent to Burgundy, although some of the wines are. Like one of the winemakers I sold fruit to got 100 points from Antonio Galloni for his Plat Pinot Noir. So if you think about it, for all the wine critics, Burgundy is the holy grail.
Right.
It's the Mecca, right? It's the highest, most subtle, nuanced expression of wine grapes. It's it.
Yeah.
It really is. So for a domestic Pinot Noir to receive 100 points, and some of these, $1,500 a bottle Burgundies are getting 94 points or 95 points. So for Antonio, and some critics throw 100-point scores around quite recklessly, but Antonio Galloni does not. Now, I don't know if he's ever given a domestically produced Pinot Noir 100 points before, but for him to recognize Plat and say this is the equivalent of one of the greatest Grand Cru Burgundies ever produced in history, starts to put you on the map. So you could charge, and people will charge down the road, I think, $200 or $250 a bottle for wines made from sites like that, which means the land is worth more.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
And so you're seeing in Burgundy places where they're charging $1,000 or $1,500 a bottle. If somebody's going to pay $40 million for a site where they're getting $1,500 a bottle, they might pay $500,000 or $600,000 for a site in Sonoma County where they're doing a $200 bottle. Yep. They might. And I think you could really look at this story like, you ever watch a movie and you're like, I know how this movie ends because I've seen this movie before.
Right.
If you look at what happened with Napa Cabernet, I think it's going to happen the same way for Sonoma Coast Pinot from the top sites. So 30 years ago, all the Napa Cabs were like 20 or 30 bucks. Opus 1 was $100, and that was outrageous. Like $100 bucks. Who's going to pay that, right? And otherwise, things were not that expensive. And now you've got all these cult Cabernets. If you Google it, I would bet you there are 500 Napa Cabs produced over $300 a bottle. Right? There's an immense amount of wine being made at very, very high price points. You've got a lot of stuff in the $500, $600, $700 a bottle. Dana Estate, Harlan, Bond, Promissory, all the Bill Harmon project.
Yeah.
All of these wines are over $500 a bottle, you know? So, and there's tons and tons of producers making wines that cost that much. And there are vineyards that are famous, like the Toquan Vineyard and the Missouri Hopper Vineyard. And the fruit from those vineyards is so expensive that you have to charge $300 or $400 a bottle for the wine if you're buying that fruit. So it all feeds on itself. So that success of that marketing effort, basically, Napa Cab is now a thing. And you'll see vineyards in Napa that sell for $1 million an acre. Well, to me, I look, and Bordeaux prices in France are not higher than Burgundy prices. So it doesn't stand to reason that Cabernet prices in California need to be higher than Pinot Noir prices. In fact, there are way more top quality sites to grow Cabernet in Napa than there are top quality sites in Sonoma County to grow Pinot. So the number of Grand Cru equivalent Pinot sites is tiny compared to the number of great Cab sites.
Right.
So I think 20 or 30 years from now, we'll be looking at a situation where, like in France, Burgundy is more valuable than Bordeaux. I think you could see it become true that both the wine made from the top Pinot Noir sites and the ground, the land, the vineyard sites are worth more than Napa Cab sites. It takes time. It takes 10, 20, 30 years for these transitions to happen. But it's very clear to me that there's a huge amount of upside for top Sonoma Coast Pinot vineyards. Just looking at both Burgundy and at Napa, you can see the story coming.
Yeah. You walked me into my last topic that I wanted to talk about, which was the future of the industry. Like, where do you see the wine industry going? And I know that's such a vague and
it's a giant question, and there's so many different segments of the wine business. And
the ones that you're intricately...
I don't have any insight into, like, Gallo. They do 110 million cases or something of wine. Their business is just like any other industrial commercial undertaking. They're looking to the penny at the cost of their glass and their foils and their labels, and their level of efficiency in making cheap wine is epic. But they cannot do also what I do, which is why we have our niche. They don't make 6-barrel lots. They just can't do it. They're just too big to focus the way we focus.
Right.
They could try. They sometimes try to create little subsidiaries to do things better, and they maybe do them better than at the giant, but it's not ever going to be what we do, because here's the key. They refuse to be inefficient.
Right.
They refuse to be inefficient. And it's not efficient to make small lots of 6 barrels and 8 barrels and 10 barrels of 20 different things. That's ridiculous.
No.
It's hugely expensive. It never makes any sense. But that's the artistic part about it. That's the compelling part. That, to me, is the fun part, is making really unique, distinctive expressions that reflect a vineyard site and a vintage and are really, unique. So
I have a better way to ask that question, because I asked a very vague question that's really hard to answer, and I apologize for that.
That's all right.
In the food world, farm to table has had its, I don't know where it is in the arc of consciousness or whatever for consumers, but I think natural wine kind of followed that in a way. And I can see by your reaction, we'll get into that. But there's that. Is there, there's been, we talked about craft beer, like smaller craft winemakers, maybe things like that. Like, is there a direction that you see, like maybe gaining popularity or losing popularity, maybe the natural wines? I'm not sure.
Well, natural wine is a contentless statement. It actually means nothing if you say your wine's natural. There's no legal content to it at all. None. If you say your wine is an estate wine, that means
just a marketing ploy. Yeah.
It's just a thing people say, but there's no legal meaning. So anyone, anywhere can say their wine is natural. You can have a celebrity say she makes clean wine. That's also contentless. No offense, Cameron. But it's contentless. It means nothing. And there was nothing about that wine that was cleaner than other wines, right? It was just a marketing bullshit, really.
Sure.
So I hate stuff like that, obviously, because it distorts people's understanding of the true messaging that people have about what they're doing. So when people say natural wine, a lot of times that's people who don't know how to make wine using shitty barrels and cheap fruit and just trying to make something, but they don't know what they're doing. And it has all kinds of bacterial flaws, and they gush over those as if those are good, because they have no clue. They don't really know about wine. They don't know anything about viticulture or winemaking or winery hygiene. They're clueless, and they make shitty wines, and then they try to convince people that that's good, like Emperor has new clothes. There's a lot of that going on in the wine business, where people make a shitty project, a really awful product, and go around telling people, no, this is great. And people who don't know any better sometimes go for it. That's not our deal. And this is to my detriment, to be honest. I'm a product-focused person. So I want to make great wine. And then what I do is I say, I make a great product, and then I go around and pour it for people and meet people and find people that like what I'm doing enough so that I can stay in business. The key to making wine in any business, making money in any business, but especially in the wine business, is marketing. So the people that make money are people who don't care at all about the quality of the wine. They buy cheap, shitty bulk wine, package it in a cute package, and tell a great story about it, and then spend money marketing up dollars. So those are the people who make money. They have no winery. They don't own vineyards. They just buy bulk juice from somebody else. They have no capital invested, no cost. Throw it in a flashy package, market it. Maybe get Snoop Dogg to market it. I don't know.
19 crimes.
Maybe. And I'm sure the 20th crime is that actual wine. You know what I mean? Like,
You said it, not me.
I just made that one up, but I'm happy with it. I like it.
Yeah.
I might use that again.
That was good.
But, like there's no focus on the product there.
Right.
It's all marketing. And I'm sure they make boatloads of money.
Oh, I'm sure.
So I do joke about this. It's like, if you really care about making great wine, it's really hard to make money. If you don't care about the wine, then it's much easier. But that's not my path, and that's not why I do it.
I mean, you do have a marketing ace up your sleeve in your daughter, though.
Well, and that is the path forward, I suppose. People always say baby boomers are dying. I'm about the last of them, born in 1963. How are you going to connect with millennials? I'm like, what's your business plan? Can you show me your plan? I'm like, over there. You see that girl standing over there? Her name's Riley. That's my business plan. She's 23. She's brilliant. She's charming. She's articulate. She's hardworking. That's my business plan. Get her on the road, and I'm going to go sit home with the wife and watch her.
Right.
And I'm sure we'll be much more successful once I just let her do her thing and stop getting in the way.
Is that hard for you to let go of the control?
It's it's hard for me to stop working.
Or that, yeah.
Because, I work a lot. But I think the other thing is there are some portions of our clientele that still want me to be there. If I'm doing a dinner at Baltusrol Country Club, they love it if Riley comes with me, but they want me to be there.
Sure.
And in the next few years, that'll change.
You'll always have a few holdouts, though, that want you
I don't
there.
think, though, in the end of the day, there's probably nobody that would like me better than Riley, but until they get to know Riley better, they might think they do.
Right.
And so I think, Riley will get her certified somm. She will get a winemaking certificate or degree of some kind. She has a chemistry major already and a physics minor. She's super knowledgeable about wine chemistry and knows a lot about viticulture and enology from being in the business her whole life. But she's just going to continue to build her credentials. And as she moves out of being 23 into being 28 or 29 or 30, then it becomes kind of, with the knowledge she has and the experience she has.
I can't imagine where she's going to be at.
Well, it becomes impossible not to take her seriously.
Right.
I think sometimes people are biased to not take a 23-year-old girl seriously.
The thing about Riley, though, and this is a compliment more than anything, if you didn't know she was 23, you wouldn't think she was 23.
Well, she's very self-possessed and unusually articulate, engaging. I took him out to dinner. I made him come to wine dinners from a very young age, and I'd sit him next to the big lady and say, okay, you got to talk to her. There'd be some 60-year-old woman there by herself sometimes. And I'm like, you're going to sit next to her and you're going to talk to her. And she needs to buy some wine tonight before she goes home. To a 6-year-old,
Right.
like, so they're very, very comfortable. I think it starts with a 4-year-old when they want a hot dog and you're like, well, you tell the waitress. And they're shy and you're like, if you want to eat, you have to talk to the waitress because that's the person taking the order. I'm not enabling you here, And so I think it starts at a very young age, getting them comfortable speaking for themselves and engaging with adults. And all of the girls, Riley, Lola, and Ruby, are unbelievable. People say to me, oh my God, like they act like they're 32. You forget that they're 23, 21, and 19 when you're hanging out with them because they engage with adults like they are adults.
Yeah.
So thanks for saying that. But I think that's really true. And I think the thing is, Riley is really young. And sometimes people just don't think young people could really know that much or have that much valuable experience. But she really does. Yeah. And she brings her own energy and personality to it. And I think at the end of the day, she's going to be hugely successful.
Yeah.
And she has her own brand, which we haven't mentioned.
Yeah.
Riley's Rose, ROWS. And, we're refocusing her wine. She's been making several wines, but we're really going to focus on what I think are the two best wines that she makes, which is her Sauvignon Blanc and her Cabernet. So we're going to really kind of focus her brand around those two and look to build the distribution for her.
Well, Ryan Rex will be really happy. He's a Sauvignon Blanc.
He loves the SB.
Yeah.
Well, I am at this point about 90% direct to consumer. So my wines go to wine club members and people who visit the winery or people who attend events that I do. And then I do a little bit of wine at some of the top country clubs and top restaurants as kind of a marketing thing, really, a way for people to experience the wines when they're not at my winery or at an event with me. But Riley's brand will be grown more like wholesale. Okay. So you'll find her wine in wine shops. Could be, at Ranch Acres or
Did she get a deal with Whole Foods? Did I make that up?
You didn't make it up. I mean, she's working.
It's working towards that. Is
presenting
that what it is?
her wines to the people at Whole Foods.
That would be huge.
It would be, I think, a great fit for her.
Yeah.
If you look at all our grapes are sustainably farmed, and I think they're looking a lot of times for female-run businesses Riley is half Korean, so Riley would check a lot of boxes for Whole Foods in terms of being both a woman and from an ethnic minority. Not in Korea, of course, they would be the majority in Korea,
right.
But in America, and doing a product that's where the grapes are sustainably farmed, and we're very thoughtful environmentally about everything we do. And her wine is amazing for the price. So I think that's really probably the best fit in the whole world is for Whole Foods to partner with Riley. Yeah. But they may not be aware of that yet.
They will
that's
eventually.
Our job.
Yeah.
And we know people, I think that could help us present the wines to them. So,
well, Eric, I appreciate your time, man. If people want to buy your wine, is the easiest way FlanaganWines.com?
Yes, FlanaganWines.com, or email me, Eric@FlanaganWines.com. So you didn't have to give people my phone number.
No, you just did it with your email.
ERIC is my first name, so @FlanaganWines.com.
That's awesome. And your calendar's on there as well. So if if you're, I don't know how many weekends or weeks out of the year you're actually home, you could probably count on one hand. But
I'm on the road 180 or 200 days a year, something like that. It's a lot.
Yeah.
Hopefully I'll be able to cut back on that a little bit.
Sure.
In the future. But it doesn't feel like I can yet.
Not yet. You'll get there.
We need to have the winery make money.
Yeah.
And then I can start to step back. But right now, and I said this to my wife. I said, look, the business really loses $300,000 or $400,000 a year. I'm just the work I'm doing. Someone else would pay me $600,000 or $700,000 a year to do because I do like 3 jobs.
Right.
General manager, wholesale sales manager,
custodian.
Everything.
Yeah.
If I paid somebody to do those, instead of making the $200,000 we made last year, we would have lost $400,000.
Right.
So we're not really making money. I'm just subsidizing the winery with my own labor effort, basically. But it doesn't feel like we can afford to stop that yet. Yeah. So.
Well, as we talked about, I know you're a busy man, so I appreciate an hour of your time here. It was fun.
Oh, it's great, John. Always good seeing you.
You too. We'll see you next time on the Tasting Room.
All right. Cheers. With a beer.
And cut.